Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host Jace, here today to talk to you about one of my favorite things other than comics, cartoons, right? We all love cartoons, and my guest today, Michael Hirsh, has been in the animation industry for a very, very long time. I guarantee you, if you've watched cartoons, you have watched something this man has created. So he's here today to talk about his book, where he talks about his long career in the comic industry, and he'll even tease his upcoming appearance at San Diego Comic-Con. So first of all, let me say, Michael, thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, Jace. Great to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Again, cartoons are something I think everybody relates to and enjoys. So let's take it all the way back to when you were a kid. What was it about cartoons that you enjoyed? How did you end up on this career path into animation?
So the first cartoons that I can remember were being in movie theaters and seeing, the theatrical shorts. So I grew up seeing Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck on the big screen. I saw some of the early Disney shorts on the big screen, and fell in love with cartoons at that young age. Then, of course, I was able to watch them on TV. But the big opportunity for me was an invitation from a friend who had a commission from Jim Henson to make 5 shorts for Sesame Street. At the time, I was busy making experimental films, but I had a group of people I was working with, and my friend asked me if I could put together a crew, and he would train us on how to do this because he had a job and he couldn't do the cartoons himself. So he trained us in plasticine animation, and we did 5 letters for Sesame Street for the very first year of Sesame Street, and that got me into animation.
So was it a situation where once you did it, once you were hands-on and saw kind of the magic of how everything came together, that something just clicked in your creative brain and you're like, well, this is the path that I want to pursue?
Well, I had always loved comic books and children's books, picture books, picture story books. And so animation really was a natural sort of move from that. So as a kid, I had read comic books from like the early Marvel, before they were Marvel, when they were timely. And I'd grown up reading DC, and, I'd fallen in love with comic books. I read the EC comics, when they were highly controversial.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, all of that led to an interest in, in animation. And what I liked about animation was you have total control over the frame. And that was something that I was interested in my experimental filmmaking. So I was able to carry that sort of passion for, completely controlling the content, the image that you get in animation.
Yeah, the other thing that I hear a lot from various creators, and it's something that creators, that comic creators talk about as well, right? If you wanted to do something live action, the budget would be prohibitive, right? To be able to do things that you can do in comics. It's sort of the same way in animation, for the most part. You can do things, big explosions, monsters, transformations, all sorts of things that would be cost prohibitive in live action. Is that something that continues to kind of push the boundaries and for yourself as a creator, that you kind of the sky's the limit with animation as opposed to doing live action?
Yeah, what's great is there's nothing you can't imagine that you can't do. And what's great about animation is one person can sit at a desk or at a computer and make an animated project that has multiple characters, etc., and you can't do that in live action. So it's really an expansive medium, and one that favors, and curries your imagination.
One of the other things that's so important, obviously the visuals, the special effects and the animation, the actual, picture you put on the screen. But it goes hand in hand with the voice acting, right? Like there's you've got to have the emotion, you've got to have the right actors kind of giving their all, really injecting the project with emotion. It seems to me, and again, this is just as a layperson on the outside looking in, that we're sort of in a golden age. Like it seems like there's never been as many fantastic voice actors that really are investing themselves. And it's like animation and cartoons are not just for kids anymore. I mean, it's been that way for a while, but certainly wasn't so much that way when I was a kid. It was like, cartoons are for kids, but it really seems like they've expanded, maybe over the last 20 years to be all ages. And the wealth of talent has also kind of expanded in that time. Would you say that's true from your experience?
From my experience, there's been great voice performers really from the time I was a kid watching that Bugs Bunny cartoon on the big screen. Those voices that did those Warner Brothers cartoon were great. The voices on the Flintstones and the Jetsons were terrific. And that continued through, the decades. And what I've enjoyed really is, working with different performers who all bring a different approach to the character voices. I think one of the things that's been interesting about voices in the last few decades is that there's been more of them that have been not so dramatic. That because cartoon voicing has historically been theatrical acting. It's over the top because it makes up for the fact that there's no face in front of you. It's an animated face that has just a few lines. It has, one color generally. So it doesn't have a lot of detail. So you rely on the voices to bring the characters to life. And so people really, express themselves highly dramatically. But when you think of shows like, King of the Hill, a show called Bean Puppy Cat that I produced in the last few years, and many other shows, many of them are, the actors are kind of doing it as if they're doing live action. They're not overreacting. They're not overacting. So I think animation has become more diverse in what a voice actor can deliver.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And again, I don't know, but I feel like it's a little maybe more respected among the field of acting to do voice acting. I mean, back in the day, it was felt, and again, super talented, like you said, but you had like a lot of the same people that were doing, multiple voices because it felt like the pool was a lot smaller. Now it feels like a lot more actors there's a lot more crossover, right? They do live action, but they also do voiceover for animation, video games, that sort of thing. Would you say that's that's the case?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. That and this has been true. If you think back years ago, you didn't go from TV to movies. It was hard to make the transition. Now you can work in any medium, and it doesn't have a negative impact on your career. It just all is, you're creative and you're doing your thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and there's something to be said too when you meet somebody who primarily does voice acting, and you hear that voice for the first time in real life. It brings up so many memories. It's so much fun. Well, you've had an incredible career with some very big hits. If you're watching this on YouTube, everybody, you can see a couple of them there. And Michael mentioned getting started on Sesame Street. I mean, a lot of us, PBS, and we remember those little animated shorts, learning numbers and what have you. So I won't go so far as to say you have the golden touch, Michael, but you certainly seem to have a knack for knowing what will work and what will be a hit. Any kind of trade secrets? Is it just a feel you have gotten over time? Like, how are you able to be a part of so many successful, and I'm sure you'd be the first to say a lot of the talent involved helped, obviously, but how have you been able to sort of identify what's going to work as an animated feature or series?
So I think what's driven me in terms of choosing projects is really a passion I had for things we talked about, comic books, right? So I've animated or produced the cartoons of Savage Dragon, Wildcats. I've had the rights to some and Tintin, based upon the French graphic novels. So I've produced shows based upon characters that I had a passion for. And the same is true in the children's category. I had a passion for BABAR and was able to produce that show. Had a passion for Little Bear and Franklin and Pippi Longstocking and many, many other characters. And it's that passion for the original underlying material that translates into a good choice, because there is no magic formula. The old saying is nobody ever knows what's going to work and what's going to be a big hit. But if you bring your passion to the table in selecting projects and producing those projects, you have a better chance of success. You have a better chance of breaking through and having a hit. And I think the key too is, can you put together an animation where there's it's a team sport animation. Mm-hmm. You have to put together hundreds of people to work on a project. So part of it is making sure that you have talented, passionate artists that you're working with who believe in the project the way you do.
So often I talk to creators, and whether it be writers or actors or whomever, when we're talking about creating story, they talk about at some point the characters really do come to life and start speaking to you in a way that when you're building out stories or episodes or what have you, or issues if it's a comic, that if you head off in the wrong direction, the character is going to let you know that's not something I would do necessarily, or they'll lead you down the right path when it's to make a particular decision or take it in a certain direction. Do you find that to be true in animation as well? As you kind of establish the characters, they sort of start writing their own story in a way?
I wish they wrote their own story. But I think it's true that the characters evolve in a way that you realize pretty quickly when you think, well, maybe why don't we put BABAR in a contemporary jacket, take him out of his 1930s Edwardian kind of wardrobe, right? And put him into a soft, casual shoulder, like an Italian designer in the 60s or 70s, mm-hmm. right? And it doesn't work for him, but you try it. Basically, look at it, and if you don't try things, if you don't allow the characters to breathe and evolve, then they kind of are too frozen in time too. So I think what we try to do is really see how far we can take the character, where the character wants to go, so that we're not just frozen, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I mentioned your appearance at Comic-Con. You're going to have your book. You're going to be doing an appearance and signing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get to there's something else I wonder. Again, beloved properties. People are probably like, oh yeah, of course, Sesame Street, Caillou, Franklin the Turtle, what have you. And you're such a big part, along with your team, have been such a big part of bringing these things to life. But it's not the same as sort of an actor or a book author or something where you've got kind of the name recognition or people, recognize you on the street. But have you had the chance over your long career to talk to people that are fans that realize that you've had a hand in these beloved properties? Any encounters that stand out? Any time you've felt really rewarded with an encounter with someone being a part of bringing these beloved characters to life?
Yes, when you meet people who grew up with the characters, that's always an incredible thing. So, the kids who grew up with Magic School Bus and who became, who went into science or who developed a passion for science, that's always a great feeling. The kids who grew up with BABAR and, appreciated what I call the charmth of the character and, try to live in that sort of charmth world themselves. Charmth being charm plus warmth, mm-hmm. And when I meet young people today who watch Bee and Puppycat and appreciate that and feel like that speaks to them, it's always a very warm experience and rewarding experience.
Well, we've mentioned the book. Let's talk about it a little bit. I'm sure it's not this isn't a tell-all. This isn't a, gossipy whatever. It's really celebrating your career and sharing your life in animation, right? Tell us a little bit about deciding to write this memoir and what's contained in the book.
Yeah, I decided to write this because I believe that it's important in the cultural sectors to capture our history because it's fleeting. And if you don't, if I didn't write this book, these stories would be gone. People wouldn't necessarily understand why we made a certain show or how we made it. So I think it's important to capture the history. And in the past, I actually did a history of Canada's comic books when I was just starting my career. And Canada had comic books that were published in World War II because Canada entered the war before the U.S. and there was an embargo on non-essential goods. So Superman stopped at the border, and Johnny Canuck was born, and Nelvana of the Northern Lights was born. I was able to acquire the rights to these comics and do a book and a TV show and a traveling art show of the original art, and then place it all in a museum. So preserving that history was important to me, and I've carried that on in my career. At Nelvana, in our 30th anniversary, when we had sold the company to Canada's largest broadcaster, we published a history of the company because I knew everybody would kind of disappear and move on in different directions. And again, we wanted to make sure the history was there and captured. And that doesn't happen often enough in our industry. So I think that, and hearing it from the people who were directly involved is always better than somebody trying to reconfigure the history, later.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's important to not only to remember it, but to celebrate it, right? Again, so many of these, like Caillou is one, my son, he's 29 now, and I remember watching that with him when he was little, and then when my daughter came along, and at one point, I even had my ringtone on my phone was the Caillou theme song. So it's fantastic. As you were putting the book together, kind of going down memory lane, both with your own experiences and talking to the people that were a part of it at the time, was there any sense of, man, I've really accomplished something? Like, talk to us about that experience of looking back on your own career.
Yeah, it's exciting to look back because I did have the opportunity to work on so many shows. And the book begins with one of the most notable where I'm flying to San Francisco to meet with George Lucas because he had seen our first animated special. And this is Nelvana's first animated special, A Cosmic Christmas. And the special had been syndicated, so it wasn't a network show. And you had to work hard to find it because you couldn't promote watch it Tuesday at 8 o'clock. It's syndicated, so it's a different time in every market, different network channel. So George had seen this, and he was doing the Star Wars Holiday Special, and needed somebody to do a 10-minute cartoon because while the rest of the special was a variety show being produced by Hollywood variety producers, this was a 10-minute cartoon that he had negotiated he could control and decide who did it. And so he ignored everybody, the network's recommendation that he go with Hanna-Barbera, who were doing almost everything on network in that era. And he decided to go with us after seeing our show. So I was flying to pitch him for the show and convince him that he was making the right choice, we could do it. And that was a tremendous opportunity for us and for Nelvana and the staff at Nelvana, because in working on the cartoon, not only did we work with George Lucas, but we were working with Ben Bird, his sound guy, Joe Johnson, one of his design people, and staff that were top people in their fields all along the way. And so what it really did was allowed us to hone our skills, improve our skills, because we were working with the best. And being a studio that was located in Toronto, which was not an industry town at that time, we didn't have that opportunity to work, with the leaders in the field. And this really was very important to the future development, not only of our company, but frankly, the animation industry in Canada, because people worked in the company and then they would be poached and work somewhere else, and they bring that knowledge and those skills with them. So that's one of the reasons I call the book The Animation Nation, is that we built an animation industry in Canada, and then we helped it expand around the world. So we built a studio in France, trained people there, worked with their staff, and gave them the same opportunities, and worked around, worked in England, worked in Asia, and worked in Germany. So a lot of international production that was all involved with bringing the best people together with young talented people and developing that next generation of animation talent.
Yeah, it is one of the things that's great about animation, right? Great about cartoons is no matter what culture, we all love it. We all love them. It's not like specifically an American thing or a Canadian thing or a European thing. Like everybody, and the different styles. Obviously you have the anime in Japan where it's stylistically, much different from something that comes out of the Western nation. So interesting to me. The other thing I wonder about, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you about this because again you've had such a long career. Writing this book and looking back at the technology, the way cartoons were produced back then, as opposed to today, when you have so many advantages with things you can do with computers and digital and sound and all that stuff. Is it easier? Is it more complicated because you have more tools? Tendency to fiddle more. Which was better? I mean, maybe one's not better than the other, just different. But talk about kind of the evolution of technology in the animation field.
Sure. So, the first time that I had a chance to see computer animation being done was working with Lucasfilm on DROIDS and EWOKS, 2 series that we produced for them at Nelvana. And George was just beginning Pixar. And so you walk in a room and, computers as big as the room, right? Mm-hmm. And John Lasseter is just beginning to do, his drawing work, and it's just early stages. And George also was developing a interactive editing machine called EditDroid. And so he had people doing that. And so I had a chance to see that, but I knew it was too early for us, and it was too early for us to make that kind of move. So we kept our eye on it, and we got into computer animation first through painting, because when you painted, it was actually a pretty expensive process to paint by hand, and computer painting, helped to make the whole process more efficient. But it also meant you could use more colors. Yeah, because it didn't cost more. You just, had that ability to add colors. So I think that was an early clue to where I think computer technology moved to animation. It added to quality, it added to complexity, it added to greater detail. Essentially, you could do more, so that when you look at animation today, it's quite amazing what an average series show looks like compared to what a show used to look like. We used to have painting mistakes. You'd have, errors that were in the work, and frames that were painted wrong. And you didn't always catch it before it was released as a motion picture or released as a TV show. But on computers, everything's easy to fix. Nothing like that actually happens anymore. So essentially, I think there's been a drive to greater and greater quality. And I would describe, frankly, the last 30 years of animation as being this drive to quality. So, there was a period in the 70s and in the 70s when animation really had gone to like its kind of lowest level, partly because only 2 or 3 companies were making it, and they were maximizing their profits and not putting it on the screen. And then companies like mine, like Nelvana and Cookie Jar, came in and started to produce higher quality. Spielberg came in and produced his high-end cartoon shows. Lucas did the same. You had Tim Burton coming in, and we produced Beetlejuice with Tim Burton. And all of that basically allowed us to keep pushing quality forward, and the demand for quality increased. So the biggest challenge today is a network that wants a show, wants it to be premium animation, wants it to be the best, and you're always fighting with, are they giving you enough money to do what they want? But the technology eases it up and makes it more accessible and more deliverable. So it's been a fantastic move, I think, to get to this stage.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, last question as we're starting to wind down here, Michael. If somebody's looking to break in, somebody is young, loves cartoons, loves animation, what would be your advice to somebody, anywhere from ages, let's say 10 to 16, if they're looking to take this path and get into animation in one form or another? What should they be looking at? What advice would you give them to try to follow this career path?
There's never been a better time for somebody from 10 and 10 age 10 up. There's never been a better time. They can find all sorts of tools online if they want to use, software. A lot of them are free, and there are tutorials online that they can use to train themselves. And they can find a home to share those cartoons on through YouTube or through TikTok or through Facebook, any of the great number of social platforms that we have and that we will have. And they can build a little business for themselves, making their cartoons, build an audience. And if their audience gets big enough, they start to earn money from it. And in turn, they can then hire a few friends or some professionals to work with them, and essentially build something up without anybody ever saying, yeah, no, we're not going to put that on the air. Mm. And that was always the biggest challenge in, building an animation studio and building an animation library, was you had to overcome what the curators wanted, what the network gatekeepers wanted, and you had to make what they wanted. Whereas today, you can have a much more personal path where you make a cartoon that you want to make it yourself, eventually make it with your friends, earn money from it, and then the networks will come calling at you, with you once you've built it up and have a following. And we're seeing that happen a lot. So I think this is, we're about to begin the next golden age of animation precisely because of this.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and similar to comics, right? Like we always say, if you want to be a comic writer or a comic artist, then do the thing. It's never been easier to have the tools online to get yourself out there. And yeah, if you're good, the talent rises to the top, and then people will seek you out, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, it's the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we mentioned your appearance at San Diego Comic-Con. I want to let everybody know. So there's going to be a panel discussion at 10 a.m. Pacific in room 9. And then there's going to be a book signing, and I should say that's on Thursday, July 25th. And then you'll also be doing a signing of your book at noon Pacific at the Stuart Ng book booth, which is booth 5012. So if you're going to be at Comic-Con, you love cartoons, you want to hear Michael talk more about the book and his career in animation, again, 10 a.m. in room 9 on Thursday, and then the signing after. For those that aren't going to be at Comic-Con, Michael, where's the book going to be available? Bookstores, Amazon, all that. It's going to be a wide release.
So they can order through Amazon.com. They can order through BarnesandNoble.com, and hopefully they'll find it in their favorite bookstores. So, looking forward to meeting people in San Diego. I always like meeting fans, so come and say hello if you recognize me from this interview. And Jace, thank you so much for a great interview.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Any last thoughts as we're winding down here?
Yeah, one of my slogans has always been world domination through animation. And what I was always getting at was cartoons are basically peaceful, friendly, lovable content. And it's a great way to spread the messages through animation.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, sky's the limit, right? Sky's the limit. It's just your imagination. That's the only limit you have. So, again, Michael, have a great con. Maybe I'll bump into you there. I'm super busy, but you never know. And to all you listeners, we want to thank you for joining as well. I'm going to put a link to the Nelvana website. If anybody's curious, you want to go over there and check it out. And I'll also put a link to the place where you can get the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Those links will be in the show notes. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can just go and click there. So thanks again, Michael. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, and to you listeners, we want to thank you for taking the time as always, and we will talk to you next time.